There's a side of grant work that almost nobody talks about openly. Not the exciting part, not the wins, not the big funding announcements. I'm talking about what happens when things go wrong. Missing a grant deadline, turning reports in late, falling out of compliance after funding has already been awarded. And the reason I want to make this video is because I think a lot of organizations assume these things are small mistakes. Sometimes they're not. And I've seen missed deadlines damage relationships with funders. I've seen organizations lose future funding opportunities. And I've seen teams completely overwhelmed trying to fix compliance issues after the fact. So today I want to talk honestly about what actually happens in these situations, why it matters more than people think, and how organizations can protect themselves before problems start. I think one reason people avoid this conversation is because nobody likes talking about mistakes, especially in the nonprofit and grant world where there is really so much pressure. People want to focus on growth, funding wins, and success stories, but the reality is grants come with responsibility. Once funding is awarded, the relationship with the funder is just the beginning. And honestly, some organizations are so focused on getting funded that they do not fully prepare for what comes after. That is where the issues start, because grants management is not just about submitting an application. It's the deadlines, reporting, documentation, budget tracking, communication, and following the terms of the award exactly as it's outlined. And when those pieces break down, funders notice. So let's start with missed deadlines. Now, every funder is different. Some are flexible, some are not. But what I want people to understand is this. Missing a deadline does not just affect one application. It affects trust. From the funder's perspective, deadlines communicate reliability. If an organization submits late applications, late reports, or incomplete materials, funders naturally start to wonder, will this organization manage funding responsibly? Will they communicate effectively? Can they follow through on commitments? And sometimes organizations assume, well, we were only one day late, but funders are reviewing patterns, not isolated moments. I remember working with an organization years ago that missed a reporting deadline because internally everyone assumed someone else was handling it. No bad intentions, just really bad systems. But it created unnecessary tension with the funder. It delayed communication and made future conversations that much harder. The funding relationship shifted after that. And that's why systems matter so much. Not because organizations are careless, but because people are busy and things fall through the cracks when there are no processes in place. Now let's talk about compliance, because this is where people get nervous. Compliance simply means following the terms attached to the funding. That can include how funds are spent, how outcomes are measured, what documentation is required, what reports must be submitted, and sometimes even how programs are implemented. And here is something people do not realize enough. You cannot assume that you can change things without talking to the funder. And I've seen organizations shift budgets, adjust timelines, and modify programs without approval simply because they thought the changes were minor. But funders expect communication. A grant agreement is not just funding, it's an agreement. And when organizations stop communicating clearly, that's where the compliance issues start growing. Now, not every issue becomes catastrophic. Sometimes funders are understanding, especially if organizations are proactive and transparent, but avoiding communication almost always makes things worse. That's the part I really want people to hear. Funders are usually more responsive to honesty than silence. One thing that does not get talked about enough is the long-term impact. Sometimes the biggest consequence is not immediate. It's reputational. Funders talk. Program officers move between organizations. Records are kept. And while one mistake does not define an organization, repeated issues absolutely shape the funder's perspective. And that can affect renewal opportunities, future applications, partnership credibility, and internal morale too. Because when teams are consistently scrambling to fix reporting problems or compliance gaps, burnout happens fast. I've seen organizations lose confidence in themselves after situations like this. And honestly, most of the time the issue is preventable, not through perfection, but just through better systems. So let's talk about prevention, because that's the important part. At Boyd Grants, one of the biggest things we encourage organizations to build is internal structure around grant management. Not just the writing systems, the management systems. Things like clear ownership of deadlines, shared calendars, documentation processes, regular internal check-ins, budget tracking, and communication protocols with funders. And honestly, one of the smartest things an organization can do is to ask questions early. If something changes, communicate. If you're confused, ask. If a deadline might be missed, reach out before it happens. Funders are people, and what creates problems is usually not the mistake itself, it's the lack of communication around it. Okay, I wanted to make this video because I think this side of grant work deserves more honest conversation. Not to scare people, but to help organizations better prepare. Because strong grant strategy is not just about winning funding. It's about managing funding responsibly once you've received it. And the organization that builds strong systems early on tends to create much more sustainable growth over time. I would love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever dealt with a missed deadline, reporting challenge, or a compliance issue that's taught you something? And if you want more conversations around grant strategy, proposal development, and funding systems, make sure that you subscribe and check out our resources below. I'll see you in the next video.